Sarah Martinez walked down the busy street in Los Angeles. Her hands were shaking as she held a folder with her photo and acting resume inside. She had been trying to become an actress for 3 years now. Every day was the same. She would wake up early, check her phone for casting calls, and then go to work at the small restaurant where she served food to pay her rent. The restaurant job was not her dream. Sarah wanted to act in movies and plays. She wanted to make people feel things when they watched her perform. But after 3 years of trying, she was starting to lose hope. Most days she felt like giving up and going back home to her family in Texas. Today was different, though. Sarah had gotten a call about a special audition. The person on the phone would not tell her much about the play. They only said that a famous director named Vincent Blackwood was looking for actors who were not afraid to try new things. Sarah had heard of Vincent Blackwood before. Other actors talked about him in whispers. Some said he was brilliant. Others said he was crazy. Everyone agreed that working with him could change an actor's life forever. Sarah found the address and stood outside a small theater building. The paint was old and peeling. The windows were dark. She checked the address 3 times to make sure she was in the right place. This did not look like the kind of place where famous directors worked. But the address was correct, so Sarah took a deep breath and went inside. The inside of the theater was even stranger than the outside. The walls were painted black. There were no fancy decorations or bright lights like in other theaters Sarah had visited. A few old chairs sat in the middle of the room. The air smelled like dust and old wood. Sarah wondered if she had made a mistake coming here. A man sitting in the shadows called her name. Sarah walked toward him slowly. As she got closer, she could see him better. Vincent Blackwood was not what she expected. He was about 50 years old with gray hair and sharp gray eyes. He wore simple black clothes and watched Sarah like he could see into her thoughts. Sarah tried to smile and act confident, but her hands were still shaking. She had practiced what she would say on the way here, but now her mind went blank. Vincent did not seem to notice or care that she was nervous. He pointed to a chair across from him and told her to sit down. For a long moment, Vincent just stared at Sarah without saying anything. Sarah felt very uncomfortable. She wanted to say something funny or smart to break the silence, but Vincent's eyes made her feel like she should stay quiet. Finally, he spoke. Vincent told Sarah that most actors who came to see him were liars. He said they pretended to be brave and talented, but they were really just scared people trying to get famous. He said they would do anything he asked them to do, but only if it was safe and easy. They wanted to look good without taking any real risks. Sarah did not know what to say to this. She had never heard a director talk this way before. Usually, directors asked about her training or experience. They wanted to know what plays she had been in, or what acting teachers she had studied with. Vincent did not seem to care about any of that. Instead, Vincent leaned forward in his chair and asked Sarah why she wanted to act. This seemed like an easy question, but when Sarah tried to answer, the words would not come out right. She started to give him the answer she always gave in auditions. She said she loved telling stories and making people feel emotions. But Vincent held up his hand to stop her. Vincent said that was not a real answer. He said that was what she thought directors wanted to hear. He asked her again, but this time he told her to tell him the truth. He said he could tell when people were lying, and he would not work with liars. Sarah felt her face get hot. She realized that Vincent was right. Her usual answer was not the real truth. The real truth was much more complicated and harder to say out loud. Sarah had started acting because she felt invisible in her real life. When she was on stage playing a character, people finally paid attention to her. For a few minutes, she mattered to someone. But Sarah was afraid to say this out loud. It made her sound sad and desperate. She worried that Vincent would think she was not good enough to be in his play. But looking at his gray eyes, Sarah realized that he already knew she was scared. He could see right through her act. So Sarah decided to tell him the truth. She said that acting made her feel like she was worth something. She said that in her real life, she felt like nobody really saw her or cared about her. But when she acted, she could become someone important, someone who mattered. Vincent nodded slowly when she finished talking. For the first time since Sarah had walked into the theater, he almost smiled. He told her that this was the first honest thing anyone had said to him all day. Then he reached across the table and slid a thick folder toward her. Vincent explained that he was working on a new kind of play. He said it was not like anything that had been done before. He said that actors who worked with him had to be willing to show parts of themselves that they usually kept hidden. He said the play would be dangerous for her mind and her heart. Then Vincent looked directly into Sarah's eyes and said the words that would change her life forever. He said, "Play if you dare." He told her that if she was brave enough to take the risk, she should read the script he had given her. He said she had 24 hours to decide if she wanted to be in his play. Vincent stood up to leave, but then he turned back to Sarah one more time. He told her that if she decided to do the play, there would be no going back. He said she would not be the same person when it was over. He said that some people were not strong enough for that kind of change. Sarah sat alone in the dark theater holding the folder. Her hands had stopped shaking, but her heart was beating very fast. She knew that this was the most important moment of her life. She could walk away now and go back to her safe, small life. Or she could open the folder and see what Vincent Blackwood meant when he said, "Play if you dare." Sarah looked around the empty theater one more time. Then she opened the folder and began to read. Sarah carried the folder home to her small apartment. The building was old and the elevator was broken, so she had to walk up 4 flights of stairs. Her legs felt heavy, not from climbing the stairs but from the weight of what had just happened. She kept thinking about Vincent Blackwood's gray eyes and the way he had said, "Play if you dare." When Sarah got to her apartment, she put the folder on her kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. Part of her wanted to open it right away. Another part of her was afraid of what she might find inside. She made herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table. Her hands were shaking again as she opened the folder. The first thing Sarah saw was a letter with her name written on it in neat handwriting. She opened the letter and began to read. Vincent had written that the script she was about to read was not like any other script that had ever been written. He said that most plays were about pretending to be someone else. But this play was about finding out who you really were. The letter went on to explain that the play was called The Mirror's Edge. Vincent wrote that the title meant the thin line between who we pretend to be and who we really are. He said that most people spend their whole lives never crossing that line. They stay safe by hiding their true selves from the world and sometimes even from themselves. Sarah turned the page and found another letter. This one was from a lawyer. The letter said that if Sarah decided to be in the play, she would have to sign papers saying that she understood the risks. It said that the play might cause her to feel strong emotions or remember things from her past that were painful. It said that some actors had needed to talk to doctors after being in Vincent's plays. This scared Sarah, but it also made her more curious. What kind of play could be so powerful that actors needed lawyers and doctors? She had been in many plays before, and none of them had ever affected her that much. She turned to the next page to find the actual script. But what Sarah found was not a normal script at all. Instead of scenes with character names and dialogue, there were pages of questions and exercises. The first page was titled Exercise 1, The Moment You First Felt Invisible. Below that were instructions that made Sarah's stomach feel tight. The exercise told the actor to think of the first time in their life when they felt like nobody cared about them or saw them. It said to remember exactly where they were, what they were wearing, and who was there. Then it said to tell that story to the audience as if it was happening right now, in the present moment. Sarah remembered her first moment of feeling invisible very clearly. She was 7 years old and her parents were fighting in the kitchen. They were screaming at each other about money and work. Sarah had come downstairs because she had a bad dream and wanted her mother to comfort her. But her parents were so angry with each other that they did not even notice she was there. Sarah had stood in the doorway for 10 minutes crying quietly, and neither of her parents looked at her once. The idea of telling this story to a room full of strangers made Sarah feel sick. But she kept reading. The next exercise was even more difficult. It was called The Lie You Tell Yourself Every Day. The instructions said to identify the biggest lie the actor told themselves to feel better about their life. Then they had to explain to the audience why this lie was not true and what the real truth was. Sarah knew exactly what her lie was. Every day she told herself that she was a good actress who just had not gotten her big break yet. She told herself that she was talented and that someday, someone important would discover her. But the truth was that Sarah was afraid she was not good enough. She was afraid that after 3 years of trying, maybe she did not have what it took to be a real actress. As Sarah read through more exercises, she realized that this was not really a play at all. It was more like therapy or counseling, but performed in front of an audience. Each exercise was designed to make the actor face something about themselves that they usually tried to hide or forget. One exercise asked actors to call someone they had hurt and apologize to them on stage. Another asked them to describe their greatest fear and explain why they were afraid. There was an exercise about the worst thing that had ever happened to them, and another about the thing they were most ashamed of. Sarah found a section of the script that explained how the performance would work. There would be no costumes, no sets, and no music. 4 actors would sit on stage with just microphones and tell their stories. The audience would not know what stories they were going to hear. Even the actors would not know exactly what they were going to say until they were sitting on stage. The script explained that each performance would be different because the actors would be discovering new things about themselves every night. Some nights they might remember things they had forgotten. Other nights they might understand things about their lives in new ways. The script said that acting in this play was like looking into a mirror that showed not just your face but your soul. At the bottom of this page there was a warning written in red letters. It said that actors who performed in The Mirror's Edge would be changed permanently. It said that once they had faced the truth about themselves in front of an audience, they could never go back to pretending or lying about who they were. It said that some actors found this freedom wonderful, but others found it terrifying. Sarah read through more pages and found stories from actors who had been in Vincent's plays before. One actor wrote that the experience had saved his life because it forced him to admit he had a problem with drinking alcohol. He said that pretending he was fine had almost killed him, but telling the truth on stage had given him the courage to get help. Another actor wrote that the play had ruined her relationship with her family. She said that after being so honest on stage, she could not go back to pretending everything was okay with her parents. She had to tell them how their fighting when she was a child had hurt her. Her parents got angry and stopped talking to her for 2 years. A third actor wrote that the play had been the best thing that ever happened to him. He said that learning to be completely honest had made him a better actor, a better friend, and a better person. He said that he was no longer afraid of what people would think of him, because he had already shared his worst secrets with strangers. As Sarah read these stories, she realized that Vincent had been telling her the truth. This play really would change her life. There was no way to do what the script asked and stay the same person. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out who she really was underneath all the lies and fears she had been carrying around. Sarah looked at the clock and saw that it was almost midnight. She had been reading for 4 hours. Her coffee was cold, and her back hurt from sitting in the hard kitchen chair, but she was not tired. Her mind was racing with thoughts and fears and excitement. She walked to her bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. The face looking back at her was the same face she saw every day, but now she wondered what other people saw when they looked at her. Did they see through her act the way Vincent had? Could they tell that she was scared and lonely and desperate for someone to notice her? Sarah went back to the kitchen and read the last page of the script. It was a letter from Vincent explaining how to decide whether to be in the play. He wrote that the decision could not be made with logic or careful thinking. He said it had to be made with instinct and courage. He said that people who were meant to be in his play would know it in their hearts even if their minds were afraid. At the bottom of the page, Vincent had written his phone number. He said that Sarah should call him in the morning if she wanted to be in The Mirror's Edge. He said that if she called, there would be no turning back. Rehearsals would start immediately and the play would open in 6 weeks. Sarah closed the folder and sat in her quiet apartment. Outside her window, she could hear cars driving by and people walking on the street. The world was going on normally, but Sarah felt like everything had changed. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, and Vincent Blackwood was asking her to jump. Sarah knew that she could throw the script away and go back to her normal life. She could keep serving food at the restaurant and going to regular auditions for regular plays. She could keep pretending that she was fine, and that her dreams were going to come true someday. Or she could call Vincent in the morning and say yes to the most terrifying opportunity of her life. Sarah did not sleep that night. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the script. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Vincent Blackwood's gray eyes looking at her. She kept hearing his voice saying, "Play if you dare." By the time the sun came up, Sarah knew what she had to do. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Sarah called the number Vincent had given her. Her hands were shaking as she dialed. The phone rang 3 times before Vincent answered. His voice sounded exactly the same as it had in the theater, calm and serious. Sarah told Vincent that she wanted to be in his play. She expected him to ask her questions or tell her more about what she would have to do. But Vincent just said good and gave her an address. He told her to be there at 2 o'clock that afternoon for the first rehearsal. Then he hung up the phone. Sarah spent the morning trying to eat breakfast, but her stomach was too nervous. She tried to read a book, but she could not focus on the words. She kept thinking about the exercises in the script and wondering what it would be like to do them in front of other people. At 1:30, Sarah took the bus to the address Vincent had given her. It was in a part of the city she had never been to before. The buildings were old and many of them looked empty. Sarah found the right address and saw that it was a big warehouse with no windows. There was no sign on the building, just a number painted on the door. Sarah knocked on the door and waited. After a minute, the door opened and Vincent appeared. He was wearing the same black clothes he had worn the day before. He did not smile or say hello. He just stepped aside to let Sarah come in. Inside the warehouse, Sarah was surprised by what she saw. The space was huge and mostly empty. In the middle of the room, someone had built a small theater. There were about 50 chairs arranged in rows facing a simple stage. The stage was just a raised platform with 4 chairs on it. There were no curtains, no lights, and no decorations. Vincent led Sarah to the stage area where 3 other people were waiting. He introduced them as the other actors in the play. The first was a man about 30 years old named Marcus. He had dark hair and tired eyes. He shook Sarah's hand but did not smile. The second actor was a woman named Elena. She looked like she was in her late 20s and had long black hair. She was very beautiful, but there was something sad about her face. When she shook Sarah's hand, her grip was very firm, like she was trying to prove she was strong. The third actor was a young man named David. He looked like he was barely 20 years old. He had blonde hair and nervous energy. He kept moving around and touching things. When Vincent introduced him, David tried to make jokes, but nobody laughed. After the introductions, Vincent told the 4 actors to sit in the chairs on the stage. Sarah felt strange sitting there. The chairs faced the empty audience seats, which made Sarah think about all the people who would eventually be sitting there watching her tell her secrets. Vincent stood in front of the stage and explained how the rehearsals would work. He said that for the next 6 weeks, the 4 actors would meet every day for 4 hours. During that time, they would practice the exercises from the script. They would start with easy exercises and work up to the harder ones. Vincent said that the most important thing was for the actors to learn to trust each other. He said that they were going to share things with each other that they had never told anyone. If they could not trust each other, they would never be able to trust the audience. Then Vincent introduced someone else who had been sitting quietly in the back of the theater. Her name was Dr. Catherine Wells, and she was a psychologist. She was about 40 years old with gray hair and kind eyes. Vincent explained that Dr. Wells would be there during all the rehearsals to help the actors if they became too upset or if remembering painful things became too difficult. Dr. Wells stood up and spoke to the 4 actors. She said that what they were about to do was very brave but also very risky. She said that when people started telling the truth about their lives, sometimes they remembered things they had forgotten or felt emotions they had been hiding for years. She said this was normal and healthy, but it could also be scary. Dr. Wells explained that if any of the actors felt like they needed to stop or take a break, they should tell her right away. She said that there was no shame in asking for help. She said that being strong meant knowing when you needed support, not pretending you could handle everything alone. After Dr. Wells finished talking, Vincent told the actors to begin with their first exercise. It was called Hello, My Name Is, and it seemed simple. Each actor just had to say their name and one true thing about themselves. But Vincent said they had to say something true that they usually kept secret. Marcus went first. He said his name and then he said, "I have been sober for 8 months, but I still want to drink every single day." His voice was quiet and serious. Sarah could tell that this was not easy for him to say. Elena went next. She said her name and then she said, "I moved to Los Angeles to get away from my boyfriend who used to hit me, but I still have nightmares about him finding me." Her voice was steady, but Sarah could see her hands shaking. David was third. He said his name and then he said, "I tell everyone that I moved here to be an actor, but really I just wanted to get away from my parents who think I am a failure." He tried to smile after he said it, but the smile looked fake. Then it was Sarah's turn. She said her name and then she paused for a long time. She had thought about what she would say, but now that the moment was here, the words felt stuck in her throat. Finally she said, "I have been pretending to be confident for so long that I do not remember what it feels like to be myself." After all 4 actors had spoken, Vincent told them to look at each other. He said that they had just shared more truth in 5 minutes than most people shared in months. He said that this was just the beginning and that each day they would go deeper. For the rest of the first rehearsal, Vincent had the actors do simple trust exercises. They had to fall backwards and let another actor catch them. They had to close their eyes and let someone else guide them around the room. They had to tell each other one thing they liked about themselves and one thing they did not like. Sarah found these exercises harder than she expected. She was not used to trusting other people, especially people she had just met. But she could see that Marcus, Elena, and David were trying just as hard as she was. They were all scared, but they were all willing to try. During a break, Sarah talked to Elena while Marcus and David practiced an exercise. Elena told Sarah that she had been in Los Angeles for 6 months. She said that leaving her old life had been the hardest thing she had ever done, but also the best thing. She said that for the first time in years she felt like she could breathe. Sarah asked Elena if she was scared about doing the play. Elena said yes, but she also said she was excited. She said that she was tired of being afraid all the time. She said that maybe if she could be brave on stage, she could be brave in her real life too. At the end of the rehearsal, Vincent told the actors that they had done well for the first day. He said that tomorrow they would start working on exercises that were more difficult. He reminded them that they could quit at any time, but he said that once they started really digging into their emotions, it would be harder to stop. Vincent also told them not to talk to other people about what they were doing in rehearsals. He said that the work they were doing was private and sacred. He said that if they started explaining it to friends or family, they might lose the courage to continue. As Sarah walked to the bus stop after rehearsal, she felt different than she had that morning. She felt like she had taken the first step on a journey, but she had no idea where the journey would lead. She thought about Marcus's confession about wanting to drink, Elena's nightmares, and David's feelings about his parents. Sarah realized that she was not the only person who was scared and lonely. Everyone had secrets and pain that they carried around. Maybe that was why Vincent's plays were so powerful. They showed people that they were not alone in their struggles. On the bus ride home, Sarah looked at the other passengers and wondered what secrets they were hiding. She wondered what they would say if they had to do Vincent's exercise and share one true thing about themselves. She wondered if everyone was just pretending to be okay, the way she had been pretending for years. That night, Sarah wrote in her journal about the first rehearsal. She wrote about how scared she was, but also how excited she felt. She wrote about the other actors and how brave they had been to share their secrets. She wrote that she felt like she was finally doing something real with her life. Before she went to sleep, Sarah looked at herself in the mirror again. She still saw the same face, but something in her eyes looked different. She looked like someone who had decided to stop hiding. She looked like someone who was ready to find out who she really was, no matter how scary that might be. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah started rehearsals with Vincent Blackwood. Every day she took the bus to the warehouse and spent 4 hours with Marcus, Elena, and David, doing exercises that pushed them deeper into their own minds and hearts. What had started as simple trust exercises had become something much more intense. Sarah was beginning to notice changes in herself that scared her. She was having dreams about her childhood almost every night. Sometimes she would wake up crying, remembering things she thought she had forgotten. The dreams were so real that when she woke up, she felt confused about whether she was a child or an adult. The exercises in rehearsal were getting harder every day. Yesterday, Vincent had made them do an exercise called The Day Your Childhood Ended. Each actor had to remember the exact moment when they realized that the world was not safe and that adults could not protect them from everything. When it was Sarah's turn, she found herself talking about the day her grandfather died. She was 9 years old, and her grandfather had been the one person in her family who always made her feel special. He would take her to the park and push her on the swings. He would read her stories and tell her that she was smart and beautiful and could do anything she wanted when she grew up. But then her grandfather got sick with cancer. Sarah watched him get thinner and weaker every week. Her parents told her that he would get better, but Sarah could see in their eyes that they were lying. The day her grandfather died, Sarah realized that her parents had been lying to her about a lot of things. She realized that they could not keep her safe from sadness and loss. That was the day she stopped believing that everything would be okay. As Sarah told this story during rehearsal, something strange happened. She was not just remembering the story. She was feeling it again, as if she was 9 years old and losing her grandfather for the first time. She started crying so hard that she could not speak. Dr. Wells had to come over and help her calm down. Marcus was having an even harder time with the exercises. During the rehearsal about childhood trauma, he told the story of the day he found his mother passed out on the bathroom floor. He was 12 years old and came home from school to find her unconscious from drinking too much alcohol. He had to call an ambulance and ride with her to the hospital. Marcus said that was the day he decided he had to take care of himself because no one else would. He said he promised himself he would never be weak like his mother. But then he started drinking when he was 16, and by the time he was 25, he was just like her. He said the shame of becoming what he hated most had almost killed him. After Marcus finished his story, he sat quietly for a long time. Then he started shaking and could not stop. Vincent told everyone to take a break while Dr. Wells talked to Marcus privately. When they came back, Marcus looked exhausted, but he said he wanted to continue. Elena's story was about the first time her boyfriend hit her. She said she was 19 and thought she was in love. Her boyfriend was jealous and controlling, but Elena thought that meant he cared about her. One night they were at a party, and Elena talked to another man for a few minutes. When they got home, her boyfriend slapped her across the face. Elena said the worst part was not the pain of being hit. The worst part was that she made excuses for him. She told herself that he was drunk and that he did not mean it. She said she was so afraid of being alone that she convinced herself that being hurt was better than being abandoned. She stayed with him for 3 more years before she finally found the courage to leave. David's story was different from the others, but just as painful. He talked about the day he realized his parents were ashamed of him. He was 17 and had just told them he wanted to be an actor instead of going to college for business like they wanted. His father looked at him with disgust and said that acting was not a real job for real men. His mother cried and said she did not know where she had gone wrong as a parent. David said that his parents made him feel like there was something wrong with him for wanting to create art instead of making money. He said he came to Los Angeles not just to become an actor, but to prove to his parents that he was not the failure they thought he was. But after 2 years of rejection and struggling to pay rent, David was starting to think his parents were right. After all 4 actors had shared their stories, Vincent told them that they had just crossed an important line. He said that they were no longer acting or performing. They were being completely honest about their deepest pain. He said this was the hardest part of the process, but also the most important. Dr. Wells talked to the group about what was happening to them emotionally. She explained that when people started remembering and talking about old traumas, their brains sometimes had trouble telling the difference between past and present. She said this was why Sarah felt like she was 9 years old again when she talked about her grandfather, and why Marcus started shaking when he talked about his mother. Dr. Wells said that this was normal and healthy, but it could also be overwhelming. She gave each actor her phone number and told them to call her if they needed to talk between rehearsals. She said that doing this kind of emotional work was like doing physical exercise. If they pushed too hard too fast, they could get hurt. That night, Sarah went home feeling like her whole world had been turned upside down. She kept thinking about the stories the other actors had shared. She felt closer to Marcus, Elena, and David than she had ever felt to anyone in her life. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable and broken, and somehow that had created a bond stronger than friendship. But Sarah also felt scared about what was happening to her mind. She was remembering things from her childhood that she had not thought about in years. She was feeling emotions that she had buried so deep she thought they were gone forever. Sometimes she felt like she was losing control of herself. Sarah called her mother that night, something she had not done in weeks. She wanted to hear a familiar voice and feel connected to her old life. But when her mother asked how she was doing, Sarah found that she could not give her usual fake answer. She could not say fine or great like she always did. Instead, Sarah found herself telling her mother about her grandfather and how much she still missed him. Her mother was surprised because Sarah had never talked about her feelings about her grandfather's death before. Sarah's mother said she had worried about Sarah after the funeral because Sarah had seemed so quiet and sad, but Sarah had always said she was okay. Sarah's mother said she was glad that Sarah was finally talking about her grandfather. She said she had always loved him too, and still missed him. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she was having a real conversation with her mother, instead of just pretending everything was fine. After she hung up the phone, Sarah realized that Vincent's exercises were already changing how she talked to people in her regular life. She was finding it harder to lie or pretend. It was like the wall she had built between her real feelings and the world was starting to crack. The next day in rehearsal, Vincent told the actors that they were ready for the next phase of their work. He said they had learned to trust each other and to be honest about their past. Now, they needed to learn to be honest about their present. He said the exercises would now focus on their current fears, desires, and secrets. Vincent explained that the final performance would happen in 3 weeks. He said that by then, the actors would need to be comfortable sharing their deepest truths with a room full of strangers. He said that the audience would be able to tell if they were holding anything back or trying to protect themselves. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror when she heard this. 3 weeks seemed like a very short time to prepare for something so intense. But she also felt like she had already come too far to turn back now. She had opened doors in her mind and heart that she could not close again. During the break, Marcus came over to talk to Sarah. He said that he had been thinking about quitting the play because the exercises were bringing up feelings about drinking that scared him. He said he was afraid that remembering all his pain might make him want to drink again. But Marcus also said that he felt stronger than he had in months. He said that talking about his mother and his addiction with people who did not judge him was helping him understand himself better. He said he thought that if he could get through the next 3 weeks, he might finally be free from the shame that had been controlling his life. Elena joined their conversation and said she was feeling the same way. She said the exercises were bringing up memories of her abusive relationship that gave her nightmares, but she also said she felt braver than she had ever felt before. She said she was tired of being afraid of her past, and maybe facing it directly was the only way to move forward. David said that talking about his parents in rehearsal had made him realize something important. He said he had been trying to become an actor to prove something to his parents, but that was the wrong reason. He said he wanted to act because it made him feel alive and creative, not because he wanted to impress anyone. As Sarah listened to her fellow actors, she realized that they were all going through the same process. The morning of opening night, Sarah woke up at 5 in the morning even though her alarm was set for 7. Her heart was beating fast and she felt like she might throw up. Today was the day she had been preparing for during 6 weeks of the most intense rehearsals of her life. Tonight she would sit on a stage and tell her deepest secrets to a room full of strangers. Sarah got out of bed and made coffee, but her hands were shaking so much that she spilled it on the counter. She tried to eat breakfast, but food felt like cardboard in her mouth. She kept thinking about all the exercises she had done in rehearsal and wondering which stories she would tell tonight. Vincent had told the actors that they would not know exactly what they would say until they were sitting on stage. The performance would be guided by their emotions in the moment. At 10 in the morning, Sarah's phone rang. It was Elena, and she sounded as nervous as Sarah felt. Elena said she had not slept at all and was thinking about running away to another city instead of doing the performance. Sarah told Elena that she was scared too, but that they had come too far to quit now. Elena said that doing the rehearsals had already changed her so much that she felt like a different person. She said that 3 weeks ago, she would never have had the courage to call someone and admit she was scared. She said that maybe being brave was not about not being afraid. Maybe it was about doing something important even when you were terrified. After talking to Elena, Sarah felt a little calmer. She spent the rest of the morning cleaning her apartment and doing laundry, just to keep her hands busy. But her mind kept going back to the theater and what would happen that night. At 2 in the morning, Sarah took the bus to the warehouse for the final rehearsal. When she got there, she found Marcus, Elena, and David sitting quietly on the stage. They all looked as nervous as she felt. Nobody was talking or making jokes like they usually did. The weight of what they were about to do hung in the air like a heavy blanket. Vincent arrived a few minutes later with Dr. Wells. Vincent looked calmer than usual, but Sarah could see something intense in his gray eyes. He told the 4 actors that today was the most important day of their lives. He said that after tonight, none of them would ever be the same. Dr. Wells reminded the actors that she would be in the theater during the performance. She said that if any of them felt overwhelmed or needed to stop, they should look for her in the audience. She said there was no shame in asking for help, even in the middle of the performance. Vincent had the actors run through some of their exercises one last time, but he told them not to plan what they would say that night. He said that the power of the performance came from speaking their truth in the moment, not from rehearsing speeches. He said that the audience would be able to tell if they were saying something they had practiced instead of something they were feeling right now. During the rehearsal, Sarah found herself talking about her father for the first time. She had always focused on her grandfather's death in the exercises, but today she felt ready to talk about something harder. She told the other actors about how her father had left when she was 12 years old. Sarah said that her father had promised to take her to see a movie for her birthday. She had waited by the window all afternoon, wearing her best dress and holding the purse her grandmother had given her, but her father never came. Her mother finally told her that her father had moved to another state and would not be coming back. Sarah said that for years, she blamed herself for her father leaving. She thought that if she had been a better daughter, he would have stayed. She thought that if she had been prettier or smarter or funnier, he would have loved her enough to keep his promises. It was not until she was an adult that she realized her father left because of his own problems, not because of anything she had done. As Sarah told this story, she felt the same emotions she had felt as a 12-year-old girl waiting by the window. She felt confused and abandoned and not good enough, but she also felt something new. She felt angry at her father for hurting a child who loved him. She felt proud of herself for surviving his abandonment and building a life without him. Marcus, Elena, and David listened to Sarah's story without trying to comfort her or give her advice. They just let her feel her emotions without trying to fix them. This was something they had all learned during rehearsals. Sometimes the most helpful thing was just to witness someone's pain without trying to make it go away. After the rehearsal, Vincent told the actors to go home and rest. He said they should eat a light dinner and try to stay calm. He said that in a few hours, people would start arriving at the theater. He said that some of the audience members would be critics and other theater people, but most would be regular people who had heard about the play and were curious. Vincent reminded the actors that the audience was not their enemy. He said that most people came to the theater because they wanted to feel something real. He said that by sharing their stories, the actors would be giving the audience permission to look at their own lives more honestly. At 6 p.m, Sarah returned to the warehouse. She was wearing simple black clothes just like Vincent had told all the actors to wear. There were no costumes, no makeup, and no props. The only thing on stage would be 4 people telling the truth. When Sarah walked into the theater, she was shocked to see that all 50 seats were filled. There were people of all ages, from college students to elderly couples. Some people looked excited, others looked nervous. Sarah realized that the audience was probably just as scared as the actors were. Behind the stage area, Vincent had set up a small room where the actors could wait before the performance. Sarah, Marcus, Elena, and David sat together in silence. They had spent 6 weeks preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, there was nothing left to say. Sarah looked at her fellow actors and felt a wave of love for them. These 3 people had seen her at her most vulnerable and broken, and they had not judged her or tried to fix her. They had just accepted her exactly as she was. She knew that no matter what happened on stage tonight, she would always be grateful for their friendship. At 7:30, Vincent came to get the actors. He told them it was time to begin. Sarah's heart started beating so fast that she thought everyone would be able to hear it. Her mouth felt dry and her legs felt weak, but when Vincent asked if everyone was ready, all 4 actors said yes. They walked onto the stage together. The lights were bright, and Sarah could see the faces of the people in the audience clearly. They looked curious and expectant. Sarah sat down in her chair and adjusted the microphone in front of her. She looked out at all the strangers who were waiting to hear her story. Vincent stood at the side of the stage and introduced the 4 actors. He explained that they would be sharing true stories from their lives. He said that some of the stories might be difficult to hear, but that all of them were real. He said that the actors had spent 6 weeks preparing to be completely honest, and he asked the audience to listen with open hearts. Then Vincent left the stage and Sarah was alone with Marcus, Elena, and David under the bright lights. The theater was completely quiet. Sarah could hear her own breathing and the sound of people shifting in their seats. She looked at the other actors and she could see her own fear reflected in their eyes. But she could also see something else. She could see courage and determination and love. They had made a promise to each other and to themselves to tell the truth no matter how scary it was. They had come too far to turn back now. Sarah took a deep breath and leaned toward her microphone. She did not know what story she was going to tell first, but she knew that the words would come. For the first time in her life, Sarah was ready to show the world exactly who she was without hiding or pretending or lying. The audience waited in silence as Sarah opened her mouth to speak. In that moment, everything changed. The girl who had spent years trying to be invisible was about to make herself completely visible. The woman who had hidden behind fake smiles and careful words was about to tell the truth that had been buried in her heart for years. Sarah looked directly at a woman in the front row and began to tell the story of the day her father never came home. Sarah's voice was shaky at first, but as she began telling the story about waiting for her father, something amazing happened. The words started flowing out of her like water that had been trapped behind a dam for years. She was not acting or performing. She was simply remembering and feeling and sharing. She told the audience about sitting by the window in her best dress, checking the clock every few minutes. She described how excited she had been and how sure she was that her father would come. She talked about the moment when her mother finally told her that her father was gone for good. But then Sarah did something that surprised even her. She started talking directly to her father, as if he was sitting in the audience. She told him how much his broken promise had hurt her. She told him that she had spent years thinking she was not good enough to love. She told him that she forgave him, but that she would never forget what he had done to a little girl who trusted him. As Sarah spoke, she could see people in the audience crying. Some were wiping their eyes with tissues. Others were staring at her with their mouths open. Sarah realized that many of these people probably had their own stories about being abandoned or disappointed by people they loved. When Sarah finished her story, the theater was completely silent for a long moment. Then Marcus leaned toward his microphone and began to speak. He told the audience about the morning he woke up and realized he had been drunk for 3 days straight. He said he was lying on his bathroom floor in his own vomit, and he could not remember how he had gotten there. Marcus said that moment was when he finally understood that he was going to die if he did not stop drinking. He said he was not afraid of dying, but he was afraid of dying without ever doing anything that mattered. He said he called his sister that day and asked her to help him get sober. It was the first time in his adult life that he had asked anyone for help. Marcus talked about how hard it was to stay sober when everything in his life reminded him of drinking. He said that some days he wanted alcohol so badly that he could think about nothing else. He said that coming to rehearsals every day had given him something to focus on besides his addiction. He said that telling his story tonight was the most important thing he had ever done. When Marcus finished, Elena began to speak. She told the audience about the night she finally decided to leave her abusive boyfriend. She said he had hit her so hard that she had a black eye and a split lip. She was looking at herself in the bathroom mirror, trying to cover the bruises with makeup so she could go to work the next day. Elena said that as she stood there covering up the evidence of what he had done to her, she realized that she was helping him hurt her. She was making it easier for him to pretend that he was not a violent person. She said that in that moment, she decided she would rather be alone and scared than stay with someone who hurt her. Elena talked about how terrifying it was to leave everything she knew, even when what she knew was painful. She said that moving to Los Angeles with just one suitcase had been the scariest thing she had ever done. But she said that every day of freedom was worth the fear she had felt. Elena looked directly at a woman in the audience who was about her age and said that if anyone listening was in a situation like hers, they deserved better. She said that love should never hurt your body or your spirit. She said that being alone was not the worst thing that could happen to someone. The worst thing was forgetting that you deserved to be treated with kindness. When Elena finished, David took a deep breath and began his story. He told the audience about the phone call he had received from his parents the week before. His father had called to tell him that he was wasting his life and that he should come home and get a real job. His father said that acting was for people who could not do anything useful. David said that for a moment he had believed his father. He said he had been struggling in Los Angeles for 2 years, working at a coffee shop and going to auditions that led nowhere. He said that sometimes he felt like his parents were right, and that he was just fooling himself about his talent. But David said that doing Vincent's play had taught him something important. He said that creating art was not about proving anything to other people. It was about expressing something true that lived inside him. He said that even if he never became famous or made money from acting, he would rather try to create something beautiful than spend his life doing work that made him feel dead inside. David looked out at the audience and said that he hoped everyone listening would find the courage to follow their dreams, even when other people told them they were being foolish. He said that the world needed people who were willing to take risks and create things that had never existed before. After David finished, all 4 actors sat quietly for a moment. Sarah could feel that something magical had happened in the theater. She could see that many people in the audience were crying, but they were not sad tears. They were tears of recognition and release and connection. Then something unexpected happened. A man in the middle of the audience stood up and began to speak. He said that listening to the actors had made him think about his own life. He said that he had been lying to himself about his marriage for years. He said his wife had been asking him to go to counseling, but he had been too proud to admit that they needed help. The man said that hearing Marcus talk about asking for help had given him courage to be honest about his own problems. He said that he was going to call his wife after the show and tell her he was ready to work on their marriage. After the man sat down, a woman in the front row stood up. She said that Elena's story had reminded her of her own daughter, who was in an abusive relationship. She said that she had been trying to convince her daughter to leave, but her daughter always made excuses for her boyfriend. The woman said that she was going to share Elena's words with her daughter and let her know that her family would support her if she decided to leave. More people in the audience began to stand up and share their own stories. An older man talked about his struggle with depression. A young woman talked about her eating disorder. A teenage boy talked about being bullied at school. One by one, strangers began telling their deepest truths to a room full of other strangers. Sarah realized that this was what Vincent had meant when he said the play would change people. The actors had given the audience permission to be honest about their own lives. By sharing their pain and struggles, they had created a space where other people felt safe to do the same. Dr. Wells, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the theater, stood up and spoke to the audience. She said that what was happening was beautiful and important, but she reminded everyone to be gentle with themselves and each other. She said that telling the truth about painful experiences could bring up strong emotions, and that it was okay to ask for help if anyone felt overwhelmed. The sharing continued for another hour. Some people told stories that were heartbreaking. Others shared moments of joy and triumph. But every story was real and honest in a way that Sarah had never experienced in a theater before. As the evening came to an end, Vincent returned to the stage. He thanked the actors and the audience for creating something unprecedented. He said that this was what theater was supposed to do. It was supposed to help people understand that they were not alone in their struggles and their dreams. Sarah looked out at the audience one more time. Many people were still crying, but almost everyone was smiling too. She could see that something had changed in the room. People who had been strangers at the beginning of the evening now felt connected to each other through their shared humanity. As the audience began to leave, many people came up to the stage to thank the actors. Some shared more of their stories. Others just said that the performance had touched them in ways they could not explain. A few people asked if there would be more performances because they wanted to bring friends and family members who needed to hear these messages. Sarah hugged Marcus, Elena, and David as people slowly filed out of the theater. She felt exhausted, but also more alive than she had ever felt. She had done the thing that scared her most in the world. And not only had she survived, but she had helped other people feel less alone. Vincent came over to the 4 actors after the last audience member had left. He did not say much, but Sarah could see in his eyes that he was proud of what they had accomplished. He said that they had proven that people were hungry for truth and connection. He said that in a world full of fake smiles and careful lies, they had shown the power of radical honesty. As Sarah walked out of the theater that night, she knew that her life had changed forever. She would never again be able to pretend that everything was fine when it was not. She would never again be able to hide behind fake confidence and careful words. But instead of feeling scared about this, Sarah felt free. For the first time in her life, she knew exactly who she was, and she was not ashamed of any of it. The morning after the performance, Sarah woke up feeling like she had been hit by a truck. Every muscle in her body ached, and her emotions felt raw and exposed. She had never realized how much energy it took to be completely honest about painful experiences. But despite feeling exhausted, Sarah also felt lighter than she had in years. Sarah made coffee and sat at her kitchen table, thinking about what had happened the night before. She kept remembering the faces of the people in the audience as they listened to her story about her father. She thought about the man who had stood up to talk about his marriage, and the woman who wanted to help her daughter leave an abusive relationship. At 10 in the morning, Sarah's phone rang. She expected it to be Elena or one of the other actors, but when she looked at the caller ID, her heart stopped. It was her father. Sarah had not heard from him in over 3 years. She stared at the phone, unsure whether to answer it. Finally, Sarah picked up the phone. Her father's voice sounded older than she remembered. He said hello in a quiet, careful way, like he was not sure she would want to talk to him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then her father said that he had heard about her performance. Sarah was confused about how her father could have known about the play. He lived in another state and she had not told him or anyone in her family about it. Her father explained that one of his co-workers had a daughter who lived in Los Angeles. The daughter had been at the performance and had called her father to tell him about it. When she mentioned Sarah's name and story, the co-worker had realized that Sarah was his colleague's daughter. Sarah's father said that when his co-worker told him what Sarah had shared on stage, he felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. He said he had always known that leaving had hurt Sarah, but he had never really understood how much damage he had done. He said that hearing about her waiting by the window in her best dress had made him cry for the first time in years. Sarah did not know what to say. Part of her wanted to hang up the phone. Part of her wanted to scream at him for all the years of silence. But a bigger part of her felt curious about why he was calling now after all this time. Her father said that he had been thinking about calling Sarah for years, but he had always been too ashamed. He said he knew that leaving her had been the worst thing he had ever done, but he had not known how to fix it. He said that he had been struggling with depression and alcohol problems when Sarah was young, and he had thought that leaving would be better for her than staying and continuing to disappoint her. Sarah's father said he understood if she did not want to talk to him, but he wanted her to know that he was proud of her courage. He said that it took incredible bravery to stand in front of strangers and tell such a painful story. He said he wished he had been brave enough to get help with his problems instead of running away from them. Sarah found herself crying as she listened to her father. These were not the words she had imagined hearing from him when she was a child. But hearing them now, as an adult who understood more about how complicated life could be, felt like a gift she had not expected to receive. Sarah told her father that she was glad he had called, but that she needed time to think about everything he had said. She said that she was not ready to forgive him completely, but she was willing to try to understand what had happened. They agreed to talk again in a few weeks after Sarah had time to process her feelings. After she hung up the phone, Sarah called Elena to tell her about the conversation. Elena said that something similar had happened to her. Her sister, who lived in another city, had called that morning. Someone had recorded part of the performance on their phone and posted it on social media. Elena's sister had seen the video and recognized Elena's voice. Elena's sister said that watching Elena talk about leaving her abusive boyfriend had made her realize that she needed to have a serious conversation with their younger brother. Elena's sister had been worried about their brother's girlfriend, who seemed controlling and mean, but she had not known how to bring it up. Elena's story had given her the courage to talk to their brother about healthy relationships. Sarah and Elena decided to meet for coffee to talk about these unexpected phone calls. When they got to the coffee shop, they found Marcus already there. He looked tired but happy. He told them that his sponsor from Alcoholics Anonymous had called him that morning. Marcus's sponsor said that someone at an AA meeting the night before had talked about seeing a play where an actor shared his story about addiction. The person said that hearing Marcus talk about the moment he decided to get sober had given them hope that they could get clean too. Marcus's sponsor wanted Marcus to know that his honesty was already helping other people in their recovery. Marcus said that knowing his story had helped someone else made all the fear and pain of sharing it worth it. He said that for years he had felt ashamed of his addiction and had tried to hide it from everyone. But now he was thinking about becoming a sponsor himself and helping other people who were struggling with alcohol. David joined them at the coffee shop an hour later. He had dark circles under his eyes, but he was smiling. He told them that a casting director had been in the audience the night before. The casting director had approached David after the show and asked if he would be interested in auditioning for a small role in an independent film. David said the casting director had told him that most young actors tried too hard to impress people with fake confidence. But David's willingness to be vulnerable and honest on stage had shown a kind of strength that was rare in Hollywood. The casting director said that authenticity was what made great actors, not perfect looks or smooth charm. David was excited about the audition opportunity, but he said that was not the most important thing that had happened. He said that his girlfriend had been in the audience, and after the show, they had talked more honestly about their relationship than they ever had before. David said that hearing him admit his fears and insecurities had made his girlfriend feel safe to share her own struggles with him. As the four friends sat in the coffee shop, they realized that the performance had created ripples that were spreading far beyond the theater. People who had been in the audience were calling friends and family members to have difficult conversations they had been avoiding. Some were seeking help for problems they had been hiding. Others were finding the courage to pursue dreams they had given up on. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. Her mother said that Sarah's aunt had called to tell her about a video she had seen online of Sarah's performance. Sarah's mother said she was proud of Sarah for being so brave, and she wanted to talk about Sarah's grandfather and father when Sarah was ready. Elena showed them a message she had received from a woman who had been in the audience. The woman said that Elena's story had inspired her to volunteer at a shelter for women escaping domestic violence. She said that she had been looking for a way to help other people, and Elena's courage had shown her how powerful it could be to share your story with people who needed to hear it. Marcus got a message from someone who said they had been thinking about suicide, but hearing Marcus talk about how his life had changed after he got sober had given them hope. The person said they were going to call a crisis hotline and ask for help. Marcus stared at the message for a long time, amazed that his words could have such an important impact on a stranger's life. David received an email from a young man who said he had been afraid to tell his parents that he wanted to be an artist instead of a lawyer. The man said that David's story about following his dreams despite his parents' disapproval had given him the courage to have that difficult conversation with his family. As Sarah read these messages and listened to her friends share their stories, she realized that Vincent had been right about something important. He had said that the play would change people's lives, but Sarah had thought he meant just the actors. Now she understood that the change was spreading to everyone who had witnessed their honesty. Sarah thought about the woman in the front row who had cried during her story about her father. She wondered if that woman had called someone she had been angry with for years. She thought about the teenage boy who had shared his story about being bullied. She wondered if he had found the courage to ask for help at school. That evening, Sarah got another unexpected phone call. It was from a producer who said he had heard about the performance from several people. He wanted to know if Sarah and the other actors would be interested in doing more performances of the play. He said that in a time when people felt disconnected and isolated, the world needed more opportunities for genuine human connection. Sarah told the producer that she would need to talk to the other actors and to Vincent, but that she was interested. She realized that what they had created was too important to do just once. If their honesty could help other people find the courage to face their own truths, then maybe they had a responsibility to continue sharing their stories. As Sarah went to sleep that night, she thought about how different her life was now compared to just 24 hours earlier. She had spent years trying to hide her pain and appear perfect to the world, but sharing her most shameful and difficult experiences had not destroyed her. Instead, it had connected her. 6 months had passed since that first performance of The Mirror's Edge. Sarah stood in the same warehouse theater where it all began, but everything about her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The scared, desperate actress who had walked into Vincent Blackwood's audition was gone, replaced by someone who knew exactly who she was and was not afraid to show it to the world. The play had only run for 3 performances, but those 3 nights had created waves that continued to spread through the city and beyond. Videos of parts of the performances had been shared online, reaching people all over the country. Sarah, Marcus, Elena, and David had received hundreds of messages from people who said their stories had changed their lives. Sarah was no longer working at the restaurant. 2 weeks after the final performance, she had been cast in a major film role. The director who hired her said that most actresses tried to hide their vulnerabilities and present a perfect image. But Sarah had learned to be completely authentic in front of cameras, which made her performances feel real and powerful in a way that was rare in Hollywood. The movie role was not the most important change in Sarah's life, though. What mattered most was that she had learned to be honest in all her relationships. She had continued having phone conversations with her father, and while their relationship was still complicated, they were slowly building something new based on truth instead of pretending that the past had not happened. Sarah had also grown closer to her mother and other family members. When she went home to Texas for Christmas, she found that her willingness to talk about difficult emotions had given her family permission to be more honest with each other too. They talked about her grandfather's death in ways they never had before. They talked about how her father's leaving had affected everyone in the family, not just Sarah. Marcus had transformed his life completely. He had not only stayed sober, but had opened a recovery center that used storytelling and radical honesty as part of the healing process. Marcus had discovered that many people struggling with addiction were also struggling with shame and secrecy. By teaching them to share their stories in safe environments, he was helping them break the cycle of hiding that often led to relapse. Marcus's recovery center had become famous for its innovative approach. People came from other cities to participate in their programs. Marcus had been invited to speak at conferences about addiction treatment. He said that learning to tell his truth on Vincent's stage had not only saved his life, but had given him a way to help save other people's lives too. Elena had written a book about her experience leaving her abusive relationship and learning to trust herself again. The book had become a bestseller and was being used by counselors and support groups across the country. Elena traveled to different cities to speak at events for domestic violence survivors. Elena said that the most important thing she had learned was that healing was not something you did alone. By sharing her story publicly, she had connected with thousands of other women who had survived similar experiences. She had learned that her shame and fear were not unique to her, and that knowledge had set her free. Elena had also started dating someone new, a kind man who supported her work and respected her boundaries. She said that learning to be vulnerable in front of strangers had taught her how to be appropriately vulnerable in intimate relationships. She no longer felt like she had to hide parts of herself to be loved. David had found success as a documentary filmmaker. He was working on a film about young artists who had overcome family disapproval to pursue their dreams. David said that his experience with Vincent's play had taught him that the most powerful stories were the ones where people were willing to be completely honest about their struggles and fears. David's relationship with his parents had improved dramatically. After seeing how much courage it took for David to share his story publicly, his parents had begun to understand that following his artistic dreams required a different kind of strength than they had recognized. They were now his biggest supporters and had even invested money in his film projects. Vincent Blackwood had been approached by theaters and universities around the country who wanted to produce their own versions of The Mirror's Edge. Vincent was careful about who he allowed to use his methods, because he said that this kind of work required directors who understood the responsibility of guiding people through deep emotional territory. Vincent had started training other directors in his techniques. He said that traditional therapy helped people process their emotions in private, which was important and valuable. But there was also healing, power in being witnessed by a community of people who could accept your truth without judgment. Dr. Catherine Wells had published research about the psychological effects of Vincent's approach. She found that people who participated in radical honesty theater showed significant improvements in their mental health, their relationships, and their sense of self-worth. Dr. Wells said that the combination of artistic expression and community witness created a unique form of healing. Sarah often thought about the audience members from that first night, who had stood up to share their own stories. She had heard from many of them over the months. The man who had talked about his marriage had indeed gone to counseling with his wife, and they had worked through their problems. The woman who was worried about her daughter had successfully helped her daughter leave her abusive boyfriend. Other audience members had made major life changes inspired by what they had witnessed. Some had left jobs that made them unhappy. Others had ended toxic relationships or started pursuing dreams they had given up on. A few had sought help for mental health problems they had been hiding for years. Sarah realized that Vincent's experiment had proven something important about human nature. People were hungry for authentic connection and truth, even when it was difficult to hear. In a world where everyone seemed to be presenting fake versions of themselves on social media, witnessing real vulnerability felt like finding water in the desert. The impact of the play had reached far beyond the people who had been directly involved. Articles had been written about Vincent's methods in psychology journals and theater magazines. Other cities had started their own radical honesty theater groups. The idea was spreading that art could be a tool for healing and connection, not just entertainment. Sarah had been invited to speak at colleges and conferences about her experience. She always told audiences that the most important thing she had learned was that hiding your pain did not protect you from it. In fact, keeping secrets about your struggles often made them more powerful and scary than they actually were. Sarah would tell audiences about the little girl who had waited by the window for her father, and how that story had felt like a terrible secret she could never tell anyone. But when she finally shared it publicly, she discovered that many other people had similar stories of abandonment and disappointment. Realizing she was not alone in her pain had taken away much of its power to hurt her. One evening, Sarah returned to the Warehouse Theater for a special event. Vincent was holding a reunion for everyone who had been involved in the original performances of The Mirror's Edge. The theater was filled with actors, audience members, and people whose lives had been changed by what had happened there. As Sarah looked around the room, she saw the man who had talked about his marriage holding hands with his wife. She saw the woman who had been worried about her daughter sitting next to a young woman who Sarah assumed was the daughter who had left her abusive relationship. She saw teenagers who had been inspired to start honesty circles at their schools. Vincent stood up to address the group. He said that when he had first developed The Mirror's Edge, he had hoped it would help a few actors become more authentic performers. He had never imagined that it would create a movement of people committed to living more honest lives. Vincent said that what they had created together proved that people were capable of much more courage and compassion than most of society expected. He said that when given the opportunity to witness real truth, people responded with love and support, rather than judgment and rejection. Sarah was asked to speak to the group about her experience. She stood up and looked around the room at all the faces of people whose lives had intersected with hers through this shared commitment to honesty. She thought about the journey that had brought her from a scared, desperate actress to someone who felt confident and authentic in every area of her life. Sarah told the group that the most surprising thing about radical honesty was not how scary it was, but how freeing it felt afterward. She said that she had spent years carrying around shame and secrets that felt enormous and terrible. But when she finally shared them, she discovered that they were just human experiences that many people could relate to.